Going to go ahead and get started and welcome those of you who are joining us. My name is Janet Duncan. I am a pediatric nurse practitioner who spent most of my career at Boston Children's Hospital in Dana-Farber as the nurse practitioner on the pediatric palliative care consult service. I then had the good fortune in retirement to work part-time with CPN, looking at content and training and getting to be a moderator for sessions like this, which are so exciting. So welcome to operating a mini ICU and providing 24/7 care in the home. We have 4 fabulous panelists who could probably talk to you all day and maybe all night too. But we've got some specific questions for them, and then we will have a question answer at the end. So feel free to put anything in the chat. And if there aren't too many of us, we can also just open it up towards the end. Just to remind you, we are recording this because we do make it available on our Courageous Parents Network website afterwards. And I think that my tech support, wonderful Carrie, will be able to keep most of you muted while our panelists are talking, but certainly, then open it up later. Also, she reminded me to just let you know that if you use speaker view, then you'll be able to hone in on the panelist that's speaking. So we will we'll let you hear from each of our panelists, and then we'll show a brief video by one of our panelists. So let's start with Sue. Do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. I'm Sue McCarthy. I have 3 children, Matthew, Daniel, and Caitlin. Caitlin was diagnosed at the age of 1 with mitochondrial disease, and that was confirmed through a muscle biopsy. And then at the age of 5, she was diagnosed with Rett syndrome. We knew both would come with multiple medical complications. So she had a G-tube, a J-tube, a central line for IV nutrition and ileostomy. We had to cath her, and she had multiple respiratory issues, and that's our story.
Thanks. Okay, how about Irene?
Hi, I'm Irene. I have a son, Riley, who is 15, who was diagnosed with KCTD7 when he was around 7 years old, I guess it was. It's a very rare gene mutation, and we've been on this road for many years, and he has a feeding tube, he's on BiPAP, he has, I don't know, a lot of different issues going on, and I'm trying to keep it really short for you.
Thanks, Irene. Nikki?
Hi, I'm Nikki Nault. I am mom to Janessa, who's a junior at Villanova, studying to be a PA. Avery Nault was my youngest. He was diagnosed with mitochondrial disease pretty early on because his older brother Isaiah was diagnosed at 5 months old. So we pretty much knew once Avery was born and he failed his hearing test that we were pretty sure that he had the disease as well. Avery was pretty sickly pretty quickly on. He was BiPAP dependent, central line, TPN, you name it. He had over 100 hospitalizations to Children's Hospital. And Isaiah was the opposite, actually spent 99% of his time at home. Avery succumbed to mitochondrial disease in 2016. And we recently lost Isaiah back in September, very unexpectedly, but both boys lived a good quality of life. And so we're pretty proud of it. So that's my story. Thank you.
Okay, and Lisa?
The unmute. I'm Lisa Burgess, and I have 3 boys. My husband, Mark, is my second husband. My first husband was gone in 6 months, which we won't go into here. But my husband, Mark, has been with me for most of the journey with Jamie. Jamie is going to be 38 this year, and Mark and I have been together for 35 years. I have 3 boys, like I said. My oldest is 38, and he works in the medical field, or 39, and my 38-year-old is Jamie. And then I have my youngest son, Dakota, who is on the autism spectrum, and he lives at home with us now. So Jamie's story is very long. So quickly, at birth, they knew that there was a problem. We were told he had failure to thrive. He was born at outside of Philadelphia. We came home. We were told that he would live a week. Then we were told, well, he's still here. He had respiratory complications. He lived a year. And then we were told he would never see his 3rd birthday. And then we stopped listening. And he's BiPAP dependent at night, has, a lot of different interventions. Right now, our latest is that he's on hemodialysis at home. We took that on in June. And that's a little bit about us. We have 5 different comorbidities right now that are major: cardiac, pulmonary, bone, etc. And that's a little bit about us. And we'll get into it more, I'm sure.
Thank you. So the other thing I was going to mention in the beginning, and I didn't, was that also in my role on the palliative care team, I had the privilege of doing outpatient visits. And so actually visited Sue and Caitlin in their home, and Isaiah and Avery and Nikki in theirs on multiple occasions. And I also remember being present when Riley, actually, when the diagnosis was given by the genetic doctor at Children's. And Lisa and I can't remember where we connected, but we're sure we've connected somewhere. But it's always from parents that I learned the most, and certainly being in their homes was always both humbled and amazed by the ingenuity and the creativity, some of which you saw already in the tips and from the slideshow. And then for tonight, we thought we'd kick off with a short video that Irene was willing to make for us, just to kind of get us in that frame of mind of some of those many, many, many modifications and ways that moms and dads have reconfigured rooms and houses and all kinds of things. So we'll share that with you now.
Our wheelchair van is our most recent modification we've made for Riley. Our first modification was adding a wheelchair ramp to be able to get Riley in and out of the house easier. Our kitchen door didn't allow for Riley to get in and out of the house in his wheelchair. We have a massage table that we use to change him. We have diapers and weights and Clorox and a pulse oximeter machine on the top. We have a ceiling lift to be able to move him from his chair or his wheelchair to the changing table and back. We have a table and chair here that I can do virtual learning with. This buffet hutch does not have fancy stuff in it other than all kinds of school supplies. So they're right at my fingertips when I'm doing schoolwork with him. Then the next thing we have is all of Riley's medications are here on the kitchen counter on a spice rack. Riley has lots of different things, including he doesn't tolerate thin liquids, so I thicken all of his formula in his water. We also have his med list on the cabinet here, so that if we had to go to the ER quick, we could grab it quickly, or if somebody else is here, they can see what Riley needs. Then over here in our front coat closet of the house, we have all of our formula, emergency seizure meds, soaps, all of our extra supplies, tubing, medications, extra diapers, wipes, baby cereal. And then I have these bags on the door that I can keep all kinds of supplies in, gloves, and they're held here with commando hooks. And then in his bedroom, we have a queen size Tempur-Pedic adjustable mattress for him, so that Chris and I can snuggle with him if he needs it. He also has a ceiling lift in his bedroom that we can move with him. He has his pulse oximeter, he has his humidifier, he has his BiPAP machine, his BiPAP mask. We have more diapers and wipes and other supplies in the drawers. They don't match right now, but we can't find anything that we like, so we've made this work. The other modification that we made that's kind of odd is we made it so our bathroom door opens out, so that when you go into our bathroom, the door is not blocking the tub and you can get his wheelchair in. And it was a fairly inexpensive modification.
Thank you so much, Irene, for starting us off with a few of those home modifications. And I know that as soon as you finished it, you thought, oh, I could have put this in or that in. But anyway, we're going to hear from you some of those other things that you did. As I mentioned before, I know that Riley was 7 when he was diagnosed. And so the modifications that you've made have sort of happened over and over, one at a time. And I just wonder how that's felt for you, and whether or not you worry that there are still more changes to come.
We always definitely are thinking what might be changing, because we always kind of like get into a groove and we're like, okay, we're good here. And then, oops, we need another modification because he adds some other piece of equipment, or he's just getting bigger and we can't move him as easily. I think Chris and I have figured out that we've refinanced our home 4 times to be able to keep modifying it and making it the best for Riley. Our number 1 goal has always been to keep Riley home, safe, comfortable, and have the best quality of life we can have for him. And we definitely just kind of adjust with the way things are coming, and we just take it as it comes and hope that it stays for a while and we don't have to do anything else. I think the last time we refinanced the house, Chris says, this is it. We cannot keep doing this. We'll never have our house paid off, but you just never know what's coming. And we've tried to be smart about how we do it, and we just don't know what tomorrow has to bring. So keep going.
And are there any, I know that you had already thought of things you wanted to add to your little video. Is there something you want to share with people was there a last addition that you forgot to mention?
Well, one of the last things we did was Riley had his room is a giant room now, because we actually took a wall down and made 2 rooms into 1 big room for him, so that it just gave us more room to get his wheelchair in, because even though the 2 bedrooms just didn't allow for his wheelchair to go in. And then when we took the big wall down between the 2 rooms, we then also took part of the wall down in the hallway, so he no longer has a bedroom door, but we can exit his bedroom and go straight into the bathroom and not have to like maneuver a wheelchair through. So we've made some funny modifications per se, like it makes our house now a 1-bedroom home because we have no door on the other bedroom. But it's what works for Riley, and nothing we did is so structural that we couldn't change it to make it a normal house fairly quickly again, which has always been, not that Chris and I have intentions of moving, but it's always something that's in the back of your mind, like, okay, you're modifying this house. The more you modify and the more you make it perfect for you, the less sellable it is for somebody else. So we've always kind of kept that in the back of our mind. How can we make it better for us, but also make it have some value someday if we need to sell?
We should probably mention that you live somewhere in Vermont.
We do. We're kind of, we're in the central Vermont, kind of closer to the New York border, but so we have a bit of a trek when we go to Boston, but it works, and we're kind of up in the middle of nowhere.
So one other amazing thing is that Irene actually, once they decided that they were going to come to Children's in Boston for appointments. She arranges all of Riley's appointments over a week. And so they come down and spend the week with multiple appointments and some, you always try and throw in some fun things too.
Yeah. We call it our Boston Marathon. I know.
One other thing I just wonder, because I know recently the BiPAP was more of a relatively recent addition. I just wonder, do you ever worry or do you ever think about maybe having to choose to limit some of the technologies just based on them being too much for Riley or to accommodate?
The BiPAP is definitely new. We've had it in our home for about 2 months now, and he is not adjusting to it well. We're trying. It's definitely something I even think of last night, throwing out the window and saying this is just not working. But like at the same time, if he continues to get worse, we then have to make options. And we have never wanted to go to a trach. It's just our opinion. Is that going to change? We don't know. We haven't really talked about it. We haven't thought about it. But it is definitely something that we always think about, like what could go, what could we have to add? Because we never thought we'd have to have BiPAP. It wasn't even something on our radar until August when we started realizing it. So I feel like for us, we kind of, like I said, we get into a groove, we think we're good, and then a doctor says, oh, you need oxygen now at your house. Oh, let's do a pulse oximeter at your house. Let's do, BiPAP. Oh, you need a new wheelchair. Oh, you need a new stander. And like, we have a smallish house. I mean, so where do you put all the equipment? How do you find little nooks and crannies? And we've always wanted to keep our home a home and keep it as normal looking as a home as we can. So it's definitely something on our radar of like, how much more can we add? And is it a good quality of life for Riley if we add that?
You're being very thoughtful and very precise with how you think and how you make it work for you and for Riley, right? So
We try.
yeah, you're doing an awesome job. All right, we're gonna move on to Sue. So Sue, we were wondering if you might think back to, maybe the first or almost the first time you came home with Caitlin after she was diagnosed and had some new technologies, and just wondering how that felt for you. What was that like for you when you first had to deal with that?
I think it wasn't until Caitlin was 22 months. She had a G tube, a J tube, and a central line. And that was the moment I knew I had to approach things differently. We had 3 small children, and, safe storage of medication and medical equipment became a big concern and one of our top priorities. I remember getting the IV pole, and for anyone who's ever had one, they're not very sturdy. And I had to try to explain to an almost 3-year-old that he couldn't push the IV pole. He couldn't grab at the tubing, and he couldn't press any of the buttons on the medical equipment, all which were very appealing to him. And Caitlin was connected to IVs 18 hours a day. So keeping her central line and tubing safe was very stressful. Caitlin would often grab her tubing, and she did chew on it. So that was always an issue. And her TPN came with this curly tubing that was appealing again to my almost 3-year-old. So we had to be mindful of that too. We had to be really careful we had multiple pieces of medical equipment at that time. So we had to be really mindful of all the things that had to be plugged in, and we had multiple power strips and extension cords. So we always worried that, someone would trip on that. And then eventually Caitlin's equipment was taking over our home, and we had to shift our kids' bedrooms. And we lived in a split at the time, and it was just hard to, fit nurses into the house, all of her equipment. So everyone got a new bedroom. And then, so that was it. It was a lot to think about.
A whole lot of technology all at once.
Yeah.
So I think, moving from there, I wonder how did, taking that experience and fast forwarding you, sort of how did that influence what you wanted to be able to do and share with other families, and that eventually led you to the Caitlin Project, which is such an exciting thing.
Yeah, I think just because you're learning everything on you're learning a lot of things on your own. And I think it's really important to share those stories, because there are other families behind you in this journey. And if just one thing you could say could make their life a little bit easier, then it's worth it. And I always did share, and I will always continue to share Caitlin's stories or my experiences to help other families. Yeah.
Do you want to do a brief snippet? I know we had a slide about Caitlin Project, but you also help make that happen, which, I think sometimes parents will say, well, what can I do, or what difference can I make? And I think it's a really exciting thing for people to hear about.
Yeah, so that came about. I'm on the Family Advisory Council at Boston Children's, and we're often asked to provide feedback on projects throughout the hospital. So one of the projects was this app that Kate Donovan created, and it was called the Mark app. And you would take medical equipment and place it into a room before discharge so you could see what it was like. And I just remember it, and you just heard my story. So I remember looking at that saying, oh my goodness, I wished I had this before, when we started out on this journey. And then I told Kate that there was so much more to think about in the medical home. And I shared that with her. I invited her to come to our home, and that's how the Caitlin Project came about.
Yeah, so I'm imagining that, thinking about how you might have felt coming home when Caitlin was 22 months with all the tubings and all the other kinds of things, that must have felt pretty overwhelming. And sounds like the drive for the Caitlin Project is to really hopefully help parents with not feeling quite so overwhelmed, or feeling at least better prepared, certainly, to go home with that technology.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Caitlin Project right now, it's helping families go home with medical equipment for the first time. And I think that's really important, because there was just so much I thought I knew when I went home for the first time, but I quickly learned I did not know a lot. So I think if families can be supported, at that point, it's going to be really helpful.
Well, congratulations to you and everyone who, and mostly to Caitlin, right, for inspiring that, for all of you and the team at Children's for making it happen now, and hopefully going to grow across the country. So thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So Nikki, you're up next. So I'm so happy that I got to know Isaiah a little and Avery a lot, as I often met you in the hospital, in the ICP with your team. And I know that for each of your boys, you love them so dearly, and were also so thoughtful with decisions. And they, at least to me, what always was, I guess, I can't imagine, and how you were able to really kind of do and create that home for both of them, and yet also make different decisions for each of them. Because as you mentioned, initially they were quite different, and Avery was always, the one that was in and out of the hospital all the time, and Isaiah was kind of your healthy one, as you would say. And so I'm just wondering, particularly around the spinal fusion. I know that was one thing we had talked about a lot for Avery, and you were able to make different decisions. And I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about, how did that feel, and how were you able to sort through all that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've always been, for some reason, I don't know, the universe has thrown me, I'm an audiologist and my kids are both deaf. I'm a neurophysiologist who worked in spinal surgery, and my kids both had severe scoliosis. So, and this was actually, so Avery was diagnosed with severe scoliosis pretty young. He was around, I want to say around 7 years old. And prior to that, I was an audiologist. So I wasn't working in neuro surgery then. And so we got the consult at Children's. And, you know, as I said, by this point, Avery was BiPAP dependent, TPN dependent. I mean, the kid was in the hospital pretty much every month. And so it was just one of those decisions that I really, you know, and I said that, you know, when I first met you guys with palliative care, is that, you know, I want to make decisions not for me, but for my guys. They always have to be in the forefront. And, you know, I knew, and I had a good talk with, the orthopod doctor at Children's, and, you know, he was pretty frank with me because Avery had like a 90-degree curvature by that point. He had scoliosis and kyphosis, which was pretty severe. And just, you know, the survival rate and that sort of thing. And because he was still very young, he was also going to need growing rods because he wasn't fully, you know, grown by that point. And I just had to make that decision that I wasn't going to put him through that. I mean, the surgery alone is, you know, 8 to 10 hours. And that's even if he survived that surgery. And then to go back, you know, and he was growing at a pretty rapid rate. So, you know, for him to go back, you know, 6 months later for growing rods and keep on doing that, it just, you know, I made that final decision which was tough because I had a visible sign every day by looking at Avery's spine every day that I bathed him. You could see how, you know, how severe the curvature was. And I knew ultimately he would succumb to that, but I felt like it was you know, I didn't want him to suffer because of a decision I felt that I needed to make for me and not for Avery. And so Avery, you know, ultimately died we don't even know, but I'm glad that I made that decision for him. And so then after he passed, you know, Isaiah was living at Seven Hills by this point, and I had the privilege of working at Tufts with the neurophysiologist. I was, you know, monitoring pediatric spinal surgeries. So I could see, you know, and I asked this surgeon who was amazing at Tufts, you know, do you mind if I bring in Isaiah for a consult? And, you know, to be honest with you, Seven Hills, you know, they did their own little consult, but you know, he was laying down. He wasn't up, you know, like the real x-rays that you would get. And so they only thought he had like a 30-degree curvature, and he had a 90-degree as well. And in Seven Hills kind of fought me on a second opinion. And I really had to say, listen, I'm still his mother. I'm going to make this decision. I'm glad I did. Isaiah, who had high lactates on a good days, 12, had the best lactates throughout the surgery. And he was home in 7 days with no issues from his spinal fusion. He got from T2 to his iliac crastin. It was amazing. So 2 different kids, but I knew Isaiah was a healthier kid, and I knew that it would have helped his quality of life. And I'm so glad that I did it. And, you know, after he got his surgery, Seven Hills, you know, he had head control. Isaiah never had head control. He gained weight because he was using so much energy with the mito to hold up his head. So after the surgery, the kid, then went from underweight to almost obese. Because all that energy that he was using to hold up his head and do things, he didn't need to do that anymore. And the kid was, you know, I mean, he lost a lot of the mobility, the rolling, which is probably a good thing because he got himself into quite a bit of trouble by rolling around. But it definitely 2 different kids. And I really had to put my mindset in that they are 2 different kids and I need to make 2 different decisions for them. And so I'm glad that I was able to do it because it was a great decision for Isaiah. And, you know, ultimately Avery was going to succumb to the disease, you know, and I didn't want it to be something of my own hands because, you know, I had control over that. So very hard.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I think though, again, listening to your own heart and to really thinking about each of them as their own person really helped to do that. So, yeah. I know you mentioned that Isaiah was living at Seven Hills. And again, I know you had both of them at home and you had your own, I remember your med supply room and your living room with almost no furniture because Isaiah that was his mode of right? He used to roll all over
Going
the
out central
floor.
lines, the kid
Yeah.
was nuts. He was nuts. Isaiah, Avery was couldn't really move much, but Isaiah was a wild rolling man at home. So yes.
Yeah. But then I wonder if you just share a little bit of doing that for so many years and then kind of deciding that maybe Seven Hills would really benefit Isaiah. Like how did
Yeah.
you,
So
how did that feel as a mom who'd been running a mini ICU for many years in her home?
yeah, so for 15 years, both of the boys were at home. I had my daughter. I was working full time. I don't know how I did it, but I did it. And I always felt guilty for Isaiah because Isaiah was very smart, but he was that classic middle child. My daughter had a lot of needs. Avery obviously had a lot of medical needs, and Isaiah was the one who was sort of left out. And he would just be home watching SpongeBob all day. And, obviously he would go to school during the day, but I just wanted more of a quality of life. And actually, before we knew that Avery, was not doing very well, I had reached out to a couple of programs because I just wanted more for him. I felt like Isaiah's got this huge personality, and he's fun, and I just really wanted to give him a better quality of life. And so right before Avery had passed away, we had learned that Isaiah did not get into the school in Canton, and I was completely devastated. Then Avery had passed away, we didn't know, but kind of knew. And I was frantic. I called, my pediatrician's office, and I just said, for me also, I was burnt out. I just 15 years of doing that life, 2 kids in wheelchairs, and you lose there's so many factors, but more importantly, I wanted Isaiah to have a good quality of life. And I called because I couldn't get respite for Avery because he was too sickly. So it didn't make sense for me to have one and not the other. And after Avery passed, they had still my respite application. And within like an hour, they had already had an appointment for Isaiah. He was transitioned within 2 weeks. He was there July 3rd of 2016. We dropped him off. We did the whole decorated his room, and I left, and crying on the way home. And I called, how's Isaiah doing? Is he crying? Nope. Next day, how's Isaiah doing? Is he crying? Nope. Never had an issue. He was the mayor of Seven Hills. He went on every field trip that there was to go on. He delivered coffee. He was the light of. And I just felt so good about that I actually gave this kid this gift that he had his peers. For me, at home, it was difficult, not because of the decision I made, but more so other people had difficulty with the decision. I didn't tell people for a while. My close friends knew, but the backlash I would get from people would be like, well, when is he going to come home? Is he going to come home on the weekend? How long are you going to keep him there for? People had a really hard time with that. He was 15 years old at the time. And so I would say that took a couple of years for people to get over it, not me, not Isaiah. It was just it really was. And even I have a couple of close friends that have kids that are, special needs, and they made the choice to keep them at home. And it was even hard for them to accept that. So I just felt, it's really tough for a parent that does make that decision, because obviously it's the most difficult decision to have to make, and to not really feel supported. You almost have to kind of, not share things with people. But eventually I just got to the point that Isaiah's got the best quality of life there. So it was honestly, of any parenting decision I made between my 2 boys, transitioning Isaiah was the absolute best transition I ever made. So no guilt about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, sort of taking the lead and figuring out what was best for each of them, which is what you did. So thank you so much. All right, Lisa, we're going to move on to you. Certainly, I guess we're calling you sort of our veteran mom, but all of you together have so much great experience.
There are many veterans in this
That's true.
room.
That's true. So I just wonder, having James caring for him as you do, is if you could talk a little bit about how you've found ways to kind of take time and pay attention to yourself, your other kids, your marriage, because I can only imagine, again, trying to provide the care in your home and also, keep those relationships going with everybody else and for yourself.
Well, You know, my husband and I talk about this. Our normal is not normal, but whose normal is normal and what is normal. And we talk about this a lot. I think having time for the family that is really true family time, disconnecting from the electronics, the phone, distractions, that really is helpful. For us, my youngest is on the autism spectrum. So we had years that were, you know, pretty intense at times. And he almost did go to residence and then settle down. But I think for Mark and I, we try to carve out pieces of time. And that looks very different for us. We don't have like Friday night, date night right now. We haven't had nursing in almost 2 years. So there hasn't been date night, so to speak, but we have coffee date early on a Sunday morning, or we have, you know, the barbecue outside where the boys may go to bed, or Dakota may come in to watch TV. Jamie may be in bed, and we get to sit at the fire for a few minutes. Our alone time, our time looks very different right now. We try to do some family activities in the house. And I think it's communication. I think with Mark, I married my best friend, and he came into this when Jamie was 3 years old. I met him when Jamie was 3, and our second date, I was like literally leaping over the table and getting in an ambulance with Jamie. Oh. And I was called right back to the house. So he saw first on what our life could be like. And for whatever reason, he didn't run away. And it, you know, it's been an evolution. But I think the taking time for yourself is really hard. That's a very difficult thing. What does that look like? And for all of us, it's different, because how do you find time for yourself? And the best advice that I got from a friend was take 5 minutes. Take 5 minutes in the morning, take 5 minutes at night, and just sit there and do nothing. Try to meditate. Don't even try to meditate, just try to breathe. And I kind of expanded on that a little bit. And then I realized, well, no, I can't do my workout on the treadmill. I get frustrated. I was like, you get interrupted, or somebody would wake up, or an alarm would go off. And so I thought, well, I'll just walk a half mile today, or a mile, and I'll do it really fast. And so what I've learned is that if I live in 15-minute increments, which sounds crazier than it is, there are times where things are quiet and I'm actually able to take that time. And maybe I don't read a book like I used to. Maybe it's a chapter a week. That's kind of a lot of what we've done. And it's worked for us. And be very fluent and very mutable and changeable. I like to organize things. I like to have my list, and I like to have things a certain way. And I had to learn that maybe things could be a certain way, but not in the order I wanted, and not all in one day. You know, my list carries on. If I get the top 3 things done, I've done something for the day.
And it also sounds like you're quite flexible with your list, that the pieces of it can move around a lot.
Everything has got to be flexible now. Yeah. Jamie went into renal failure the first week of the pandemic, and we couldn't get an OR, and he had a central line put it in a treatment room. And it was just a very difficult week all around. And looking back on the last almost 2 years now, coming into the pandemic, losing my nursing the first week because they had concerns with their families. I think being able to be extremely flexible and not be afraid to just say, this isn't going to be perfect, and this isn't going to look great. And there were weeks that I really didn't know where we were going to end up or what was going to happen. And we just kind of rebuilt our schedule. And it took us probably 6 or 8 months. But for the first 19 months of the pandemic, I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning with Jamie, so he could be the first one in the isolation unit for dialysis, because we were in an adult unit and it was so high risk to even be there. And we were in a smaller unit. and we did dialysis, and I was still going to school. So I was doing schoolwork while he was on dialysis in this little tiny closet of a room. And it somehow all worked out. And then after I graduated, I was able to start dialysis training 2 days later, where I had planned to take like a month off with him, but kind of relax. That all kind of fell together. So nothing has ever been exactly how I planned, but somehow making a plan has kind of prepared me so that when it happened, there was some preparation. We've just kind of gone with the flow, so to speak, the best we can. And it's not always perfect. There are days that I wish it was a little different, but we kind of, it's a different kind of acceptance, I guess.
Yeah. I'm thinking that I'm only imagining that I would have times when I might feel like just screaming out loud or pounding a pillow or something else for just listening to all that you've sort of had to rearrange. Are there times that you just jump up and down or?
Oh yeah, my Italian leaks out. I'm Italian and Finnish. And that's our joke. My Italian leaks out, and I will have this, you know, my husband will see me, and he said, it's like every 6 weeks I have a day, and I get up in the morning and he knows, just make more coffee. Start there. And he will kind of back off and go, good morning, but very carefully. And then nobody says anything to me. Even Jamie, in his own way, he's at a 5 to 7 year, you know, age range for his understanding and, you know, cognitively now. He had a large arrest in 1999 and was on a ventilator for over a week. And Children's actually told me, had told us that he was probably going to just pass, and then he didn't. And they were talking to us about taking him off the vent when he woke up. But he woke up with the same personality, but a very different child than he had been previously. Even Jamie senses, he'll say, oh, it's that day, and he'll put his hand up. Like, oh, I'm stuck with her.
Okay, thanks so much. All right, we thought we would go through each of our panelists again and ask them for their top tips or tricks in terms of running this mini ICU in their home, so that we could get those pearls of wisdom, or if you didn't catch them in the waiting room on the slides, this is their chance to kind of say that special thing out loud. Okay, so let's see, Irene, you're up first for tips or tricks that you'd like to share with our group tonight.
I wrote a couple things down so I could make it quick.
Okay.
Think outside the box, not necessarily what you think of, like for the changing table. We use a massage table. A changing table is thousands of dollars on, but a massage table that's easily cleanable, under 200 bucks on Amazon. And it works great. You can Clorox it, you can clean it, it holds up well, perfect.
Yeah.
The back of the doors or the inside of a door is empty space that you have, hang bags on it. Like, find the little nooks and crannies in your house that you can put stuff, use the space without like more clutter if you can. I use note cards that I write down like all of Riley's medication and supplies on, that say like diazepam, and I write down like 28 days. So then when I get it delivered, I know that 28 days later, I need to call and order it again. So I can keep a system, because having like 30 different medicines and 5 different supply companies with stuff, I can't keep track. But if I keep my note cards, I keep them on the fridge every Monday. I look to see what I have to order that week, and I just order everything on a Monday for the week. Don't be afraid to ask for help or ask other parents that may have had the same either situation or piece of equipment, what their tricks and tips are for you. Because there's a lot of us moms out there that are willing to help others. And so that's what I do. I reach out to my friends and ask. I think that's my quick tricks.
All right. I have to say, one of your biggest tricks was getting that van, and the way, so people may come your way, how you managed to get that funded and worked out. thankfully, eventually.
Not an easy way and not any way I wish any parent would have to do it.
Yeah, I know. All right. Well, it was still very impressive when you showed me that. So, all right, Sue, you're up next.
A plastic clear shoe organizer on a door is key. I mean, I have them all throughout my house. In some closets, I have scissors and batteries and all of that. But for Caitlin's medical supplies, it was huge. It's inexpensive and it's an easy way to put some medical supplies. Plastic bins that you can put the supplies in, and my own personal favorite, I did become attached to my label maker. I would have to say that it was so much easier to have things labeled. And I remember having new nurses come in and how much they appreciated having everything labeled. They knew where everything was, and I tried to group things together by system. So those would be my quick tricks, tips.
So not only being able to kind of have things you can see into, but the labels as well to kind of make it even more organized. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome. Okay. The other tip was to get a second refrigerator, right? For TPN.
Yeah, that is a tip. Yeah. I think Nikki and I had talked about that. Yes, when you have TPN for your child, nothing can prepare you for 7 giant bags of TPN with additives. And, as our kids get a little bit more complicated, IV fluids and Lasix and all the things that you have to put in the refrigerator. So yes, and a lock if you have small children. We had a little one who liked to go in the refrigerator. So that was important too.
Yeah. All right, Nikki.
A bit out of the game a little bit, but I think one of my biggest tips are those blue chucks. If I did not use that for everything you could possibly use that for, including Halloween pumpkin carving with my daughter. You can use it to clean up big messes. I mean, with the kids, I mean, I tried to make sure that I stockpiled as many chucks as I could get. And when it was time to do projects with the boys and Janessa, we would put the blue chucks on the table and carve pumpkins. And then you could just, so that's easy to clean up messes. I can't remember a lot of tips and tricks, but I think what has worked for me and my family, and I think is really, really, really important is, and I think Lisa touched on that, is finding that time for you, finding that time for your spouse. Me and my husband have been together for 30 years. We've lost 2 kids and we're as solid as ever. And I think a big part of that I owe to, whether it's, I'll never forget this quick story. It was Halloween and my poor daughter was trick-or-treating and the nurse, Avery, was, had pulmonary edema. And I had this big old glass of wine and I just wanted to finish my big old glass of wine. And she just said, that is it. I can't take it anymore. This kid has to go to the hospital. And I still think about that glass of wine that I didn't finish. And I just think it's just, we didn't, as moms, we just get so stuck in the medical aspect that sometimes we forget about ourselves, our spouses, our other healthy children. And I think that really is key, because there will be a point where that is no longer, and you still have that base that you need to go back to and be able to fall back on. And I think it happens so easily. So I just think as moms, as dads, in couples, you got it, whether it's the 10 minutes for coffee, whatever you need to do, if you can get nursing. I know it's tougher now with COVID and such, but I think that really is key, because when things go down, it's going to ultimately just be the 2 of you and the children that you have left in the home. So I think that's the best advice that I can give.
Great. Thank you, Nikki. All right, Lisa, you're up.
So Nikki, you just reminded me about chucks, but I'm thinking about the cloth chucks. They now make them long, like 5 feet long. And they're fantastic because even when Jamie slides down the bed, I still have chucks under him so that we can lift him back up the bed. So the big,
that's great.
Chucks, yeah. My sister found them she found more of them on Amazon. We actually found them caregiving for my parents. Be organized. as organized as you can be, have a schedule. I own stock in Post-it notes. And my Post-it notes allow me to take my list and rearrange my list for the day. So I still feel like I'm in control of my list, but I can change the order and it's not all scribbly. Do weekly inventory. Try to do inventory on medications and supplies, because all of a sudden you're down to the last one because you've had a bad couple weeks or a tough couple weeks, and it's a panic. And take things from other parents, tips and tricks. I've reached out to Sue. I see Erin Ward. I've reached out to Erin, said, help, please. How do you do this? I can't find this. Reach out. Sometimes you talk to families, you go to different things, you sign into webinars, and you may only grab 2 or 3 things, but when you add the 2 or 3 things up from every single thing, you've actually made a whole group of tips and tricks of your own that fit you for your family and your life. And I'm going to leave you with, you have to have a sense of humor. As crazy as it gets, the sense of humor will get you through most days.
Besides,
Totally agree, Lisa.
yeah, it's good medicine for yourself to laugh out loud, right? Use those
Yeah,
muscles
scream, but
in
laugh
that
too.
air. Yeah, exactly. All right, I'm going to turn to my colleague Carrie to see if there's any particular things either in the chat or if we should open it up for any other questions.
There's not a whole lot in the chat. Blythe was just asking if there was other specific websites or groups where you guys do connect to find tips with other families. If there are specific places that you go, or I think most of you kind of mentioned that you collect these parents along the way, and maybe that's how most of it happens. But if anybody had anything specific that you wanted to share. And the rest of the group, we have a small group here, so please feel free to unmute, turn on your camera, ask a question with the last few minutes that we have with our panelists.
I have a couple of groups I go to. I have a Boston Children's Family page that I check out. I have a pediatric and a general medical supply exchange that I check out, because right now I'm like in this hunt for these feeding tube supplies that I can't seem to find. I'm in a feeding tube Facebook group that I like, and then there's a BiPAP, CPAP Facebook pediatric group that I'm in. So I just kind of I just search a Facebook and see what I can find for groups, and then when I don't need it anymore, I either unfollow or hide their stuff. And then when I need it again, I go look. And I also try to keep I have accumulated some friends that I don't really know, but have other kids with medical stuff. So when Riley had to go on BiPAP, I knew one mom in my list who had a child with BiPAP. So I reached out to her, which got me connected to 3 other moms on BiPAP that she's like, you need to talk to these guys. So I just kind of try to keep an inventory in my mind of my friends and who has what in my network.
I'm going to add one thing that you also do, and that is if anybody needs help getting to Disney World, that Chris and Irene have found the most amazing way to do that with Riley.
41 days and a wake up and we're there.
Okay, every year. So any friends who need help with that, go right there, because Irene knows how to do it. Okay. Anybody else have a group or that they would recommend or for support or answers, questions?
I think the Facebook groups, there are different ones for genetics diagnoses. We found out we had a chromosome 10 deletion at almost 30 years old. So we got our diagnosis backwards. And then there's also a lot of renal groups. And we're in a home dialyzer group right now that is specifically for home. A lot of it's geared, some of it's geared for adults, but a lot of the older pediatric kids, some of the stuff crosses over. you can sometimes just go to Facebook and Google your diagnosis and stumble into a group.
Mhm. All right. I wonder if from our participant group, there's any other helpful hints, because I know there's some other moms out there. Please share your expertise if you want, or if you're able.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
All right, well, I will
Well,
then
here,
just,
Wallace has a, Janet, there's a good question
okay,
from Wallace, Dr. Mulkin. As if it, well, Wallace, Wallace, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. So I'm currently still at work. That's why I'm not showing my video, but I am a ICU physician and also work in our outpatient complex care clinic here in Texas, and often specialize in children who are going home for the first time with new trach vent, G-tube technology. And I just wanted first off, thank you all for sharing. It's so powerful to just hear your stories. And is there anything from a medical side that really helped you with that first initial transition? As I know it can be so scary, and I struggle with there's really no preparation, I'm sure, for what life will be like, but I just wanted to see if any of you guys felt there was anything in particular that you received that was really meaningful or helpful.
great. Anybody want to jump into that? Lisa?
I would say clinician support. I mean, we were in the 80s and a lot of kids didn't go home at that time. It wasn't even an option. We had to fight to go home. And I was an animal science major, and I look back on that, and that was probably helpful because the technology wasn't scary to me. That piece wasn't frightening, but the piece of going home with your child was very much a very alone process. But there were clinicians. There was a nurse in particular, Pat McCarthy, who kind of took me under her wing, and different physicians that supported us. And that was our experience. But like I said, that was 1985.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Wallace, I'll also tell you and the whole group that we do send out a follow-up email, and attached to that too, Wallace, I would encourage you to find the Caitlin Project article that's been published, because it also talks about how they're improving this kind of discharge, even using simulation for parents to, simulate different scenarios before they go into the home. So.
Yeah, that's the Caitlin Project has a lot of good stuff.
Yes, thank you. I'll definitely check that out. We do simulation and things like that, but I still worry with that. But thank you all very much.
I also think, as Lisa said, having phone a friend, which would be a clinician or something, is really vital. I mean, I know that Sue dealt with that. During the middle of the night, you're a TPN. You have issues with your pump or something like that. For us, that's you almost feel like it's life or death. And sometimes getting in, when you call through the system at Children's, you have to go through the pager system and that sort of thing. And I understand that people aren't always on call, but for us, this means a difference of our kid being taken by ambulance, or if it could be a simple fix. So I think when these kids are discharged with a central line or the BiPAP or these life-sustaining pieces of equipment, being able to have that dial a friend a connection at the hospital is really vital.
And I know Janet froze and is probably trying to get back on, but I've heard her talk a lot, and some of these moms, just about how important a home visit is from clinicians, which is really hard to do and doesn't always fit the model of the hospital system. But I think programs like the Caitlin Project and just palliative care programs or other places where people can do those home visits before and then during to see what life is really like helps families feel a lot more supported and understood with what's actually going on. So Janet has froze and is gotten kicked off, but we are wrapping up the end of the session tonight. Thank you everyone for joining. We will send an email, as she mentioned, with some resources and upcoming events if anybody would like to join those. And we will see you next time. Thank you to all the panelists. You guys are amazing. Thanks for sharing your stories.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.